Between the recent movie ISS, the Apple series Constellation, and now the German Netflix limited series The Signal, I think we should probably be very wary of anyone on the International Space Station. Paula returns to Earth after months in orbit, but tragically, she never makes it home. The plane carrying her vanishes without a trace, leaving Sven and his daughter Charlie waiting in vain at the airport. Determined to find answers, Sven follows a clue left by Paula, a puzzle, but the more he unravels the mystery, the more his life falls apart and the greater the threat to him, Charlie, and ultimately the world. The show is steeped in both mystery and drama, using family as a thematic driver. We're introduced to the trio of Paula, Sven, and Charlie, mom, dad, and daughter, and they look to live simply and come across just as a typical family. Paula's an astronaut, and after a mission on the ISS, the plane that she's on that's returning her home disappears, thrusting Sven and Charlie, along with the other astronauts' family, and then pretty much the world, into a suspicious storm. Curious to find out what happened, but also quick to assign blame. Now, because this is only a 4-episode limited series, the story has to work to get us invested in the characters and ultimately be concerned with their outcomes in a relatively short time. I think it's rather easy to connect with Sven and Charlie. We spend the most time with them, getting small chunks of Paula through flashbacks that help to inform us on her thoughts and mannerisms. Now, Sven is played by Florian David Fitz, and he also wrote some of the screenplay for this show. Now, he's got a quiet demeanor and sometimes comes across as mousy, but look can be deceiving when pushed. And because he is so compassionate and caring, it's easy to get on his side. And I kept waiting for a shoe to drop that would bring either some massive rift or maybe a fight between him and Paula. But I'm not going to tell you if that happens or not. Una Bennett plays the daughter, Charlie, and she is convincingly expressive and sympathetic. Now, I don't know if she's deaf in real life, but for this, she plays a deaf character who wears cochlear implants to simulate her sound. Now, as a result, she's very observant, picking up on emotional body nuances that go unnoticed by most others. There's also a large conspiracy theory vibe that the story puts off. Astronauts on an enigmatic mission who disappear upon return. Then toss in the fact that these particular astronauts were funded privately by a billionaire. And the show's got it all. Black vehicles that follow characters suspiciously, scientists who vanish from their homes, cryptic voicemails, character manipulation, and then clue-filled riddles. And all of these work to build out an intriguing and pretty captivating watch. I was instantly sucked in. And not because I knew a ton about the characters from the start, but because the situation that's introduced right at the beginning is bubbling with suspense. And I found it especially tense when characters were being manipulated or having their minds messed with. In these sequences, they work to make us question what we've seen and also the reliability of characters. And when there's a ton of doubt created, the mystery becomes more complex and convoluted because it's almost impossible to tell what's true and what's not. And the show also likes to throw in some areas of misdirection, or at least confusion and doubt. We're shown very briefly a crazy visual. It's one of those blink and you'll miss it type of things. It does get explained later on, but not overtly. And there are other areas too that don't have to do with visuals, but the story lets us believe something for quite a while before then showing us the truth. And now, the flashing between present and flashbacks, that can be slightly confusing at times. Not so much when it's just showing us Paula on the ISS, because we can tell that's in the past, but when a scene will transition to Sven first, and then we're shown Paula. Whether she's near Sven or even up in space, in that little interim, it can be tough to pinpoint exactly where we are in the timeline. Now, I don't count this as a massive negative, though, because these are typically resolved pretty quickly. Now, I really had fun with the pursuit for answers. Not only is Sven desperately trying to find out what happened to his wife, but he's also got police and national investigators looking into him and Paula, searching to see if they had anything to do with the plane's disappearance. Now, something though that I would have preferred wasn't so vague was some of the motivations of certain characters. Now, I need to be vague in this because it ventures into spoiler territory, but one or two players could have used more background on why they carried out the actions that they did. Now, something that helped to make this enthralling and exciting was the driving pace. There are a couple of different times when deadlines are given, and that urgency then translates well through the characters and the narrative. They're under pressure to either get somewhere or accomplish something, so that this ticking clock is hanging over the characters, pushing them forward. And it could sound like the pace gets to be too quick for the storytelling. More often than not, though, the storyline is chugging along without dragging or skimping on details. Now, the special effects are probably the weakest portion of this show. More than a few times when we're shown the astronauts inside the ISS, there are visible areas on their suit that have been bunched up where the harness is to hold them in midair so that it simulates zero gravity. There's also a time when the American astronaut is oddly positioned while he's floating. I mean, just because we can't see the wires, his stance and his movements are just the result of suspension. Then, also, when the astronauts are back on Earth, there's this sunset and a low-light background, which has a glaring effect of an obvious green screen. Now, this was an easy binge. The 4 hours slipped by thanks to the engaging mystery and the family drama that builds with intensity as new facts keep coming to light. But with that, I can see how the ending of this could be cause for disappointment for some. And it's not necessarily ambiguous, but it's also not blatantly defined, and it can be classified as somewhat depressing. For me, though, I found the ending poignant and thoughtful. I mean, it's sort of a cautionary tale, but an encouraging one. So overall, The Signal is a well-crafted sci-fi mystery that leans heavily on the theme of family and trust to drive the narrative. The actors deliver emotional performances, crafting complex personas layered with depth. And while the special effects weren't always great, and some character areas are lacking in development or motive, the intrigue and conspiracies work, building an engaging thriller. There's brief sex and nudity, a lot of profanity, and some violence. I give The Signal 4 out of 5 couches. Now, sci-fi has been fairly prevalent recently. Are there any that are your favorites? I'd love to know what you're watching in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.